So, Dave, recently you've talked to our church about sex, sexuality, and the family, and the interplay among those things. And so, I wanted to ask you what you thought would concern you as you look at those topics facing both the church and the culture in the modern day.
Okay. The things that can come to mind right away that concern me is the massive use of pornography that is rampant in the church amongst men and even women as well, which is teaching all kinds of lies, um, both in terms of what intimacy is, what sexual intimacy is, and uh, in, not only is it often just really crude and or even violent, but it continues to give this message that it doesn't matter if you have made vows, marriage vows to one another, in order to enter into these kinds of that kind of activity, and that lie isn't said, but it's you're watching that. That's what someone's watching when they're watching pornography, and then they are in essence entering into it. They're lusting, and they're entering into it, and they treat themselves to that lie without necessarily going out and being with another person. Um, and then that begins also to put a process in people's minds, and there's all kinds of studies now out here about why young people are not getting married, um, and there's all kinds of reasons that we're coming up with. But I think one of the reasons is the um, there isn't quite the problem of burning that Paul is talking about, because people are having these kind of false relationships with images,
Mm-hmm.
false sexual images, and entertainment with images and not people, and you just lose so much in that. But and folks then they really do get very addicted to this habit, very enslaved to this habit. So I think that's a big problem. And alongside, I would say another problem or concern I have is the lack of um, young men and women, Christians, getting married, pursuing marriage, thinking instead that they need to put off marriage because it will get in the way of other goals that they have, career goals, money goals, or maybe they're in a lot of debt and they feel like they've got to get out of debt first before they get married. Um, and that's always been a temptation, at least all the way back in my day as well. But it seems to have really ramped up, and there's almost a sense sometimes I hear in young people, a sense of privilege. I'm I need more me time right now. I need to spend more time fulfilling my desires right now before I am bound to a family and all those other obligations, which I think, and I'm not saying that everybody who's not married is thinking this way. There can be all kinds of reasons that a person's not married at the moment. But if you look at the trends and you try to analyze why are the trends the way they are, why is it that men are marrying, on average now somewhere near 30 years
Yeah,
old?
I think it's about 27, 28.
Yeah, and that's just been unheard of in our culture. Well, so trend wise, why is that happening? And I think that there's some of that. And I also think in the Christian culture, there has been a lack of teaching and embracing the idea of covenant faithfulness in generations, and building families for generations, and that being your calling. Like, no matter what else you're doing in terms of career wise and hobbies and interests that you have and studies, you're called to be a man who finds a wife, and builds a family for generations. You are doing something that is now giving to the world more hands and more mouths and more people who love God and are going to take charge of that great commission and kingdom building. And uh, so I think those are my concerns. That's not being taught, embraced, believed, and so I think people are going in some more selfish ways as a trend.
Do you think that's because of our culture's lack of appreciation for or putting importance on the family as a whole, and so they see other goals as more attractive?
Well, there certainly is a strong individualistic view of what it means to be a Christian, and so that I think that affects church membership and attendance, and it affects building a family. Because I enter into those relationships as an if I enter into those as an individual, then I'm entering into them much more on a consumer basis than I'm trying to create something, or I'm joining in on a work, a movement, a mission that has been given to us. So the church has been given a mission, and I'm becoming a part of that mission, which includes being a part of this broad body of believers. And I've come from a family. Everybody's come from a family, and I'm not to see myself completely removed from that family, even as a young man leaves, and he's leaving so that he can begin a family, a new household. And so family should be something that we are thinking about in terms of building society, and instead of thinking just as an individual consuming whatever is around us or whatever we can have. So I don't know if that makes sense.
If then the church has acquiesced all of these things over time, and oftentimes culture will follow the church, or the church will allow certain things to creep in which corrode society over time, then we are tasked with retaking these things. So then, that's the goal of our church, and I would argue the church corporate. So then where are we taking things back? Where are we succeeding in the areas of sex and family?
Yeah, well, we love children, and we express that by wanting them to be a part, believing God wants them to be a part in the worship with us. So we hold that worship is the central thing, that Sunday morning gathered together as the saints of God before Him in worship, in word and sacrament together, is for the whole family of God, and we believe that includes our children. And so we invite and enjoy having the children with us, with all the little extra mayhem and interruptions that brings. We love that. And I think that, so that's, well, what does that have to do with sex? Well, where do you think the children came from? And we want to be like the Puritans were, which were very happy to talk about enjoying the things of the earth that God has given, including sexual happiness in marriage. They were not afraid to talk about that. They were not. They were happy to give a hat tip to the fact that what's going to be going on behind closed doors is a wonderful thing, and we're not afraid to talk about it. We're not afraid to enjoy it. We are not prudish about it at all. We just believe that it has to be used. It's a powerful thing. It has to be used the way God intended for it to be, which is in the protection of those covenant vows, and where you have a loving, intimate, ongoing relationship with your spouse that's all tied together relationally. So I think we talk about that. We have children in. We're willing to open up passages of the Scripture that I think the church was embarrassed to talk too much about sexual immorality, or to talk about adultery, or to talk about divorce and remarriage, or to talk about the call to have children and raise a family and see generations around your table, and all the things that come from that sexual union. I think our church certainly is talking about that more, preaching from those passages more, encouraging people to apply those passages in their lives and be thinking about creating families, and that as being a part of society, of building a society.
I also think, at least in the modern Christian circles, if those subjects are talked about, it is often talked about in the negative, such as don't participate in divorce or sexual immorality or all of these things, whereas I think often it is less preached that these things in their proper contexts, and you do have to lay out the proper context, are good things.
Yeah, right. Yes. So, trying to give a positive scriptural description of the sexual union of marriage is uh, is super important, and in that, so you're not just talking about don't, but we're also saying do.
Right.
This is the way you do it.
Right. It's the idea of putting off something and then
And putting on.
something.
Yep.
So then, for these things to be in place, a young man and a young woman have to pursue one another. The young man will pursue the young woman through. You have argued for the idea of courtship.
Mm-hmm.
So that is often led by the father. Well, it is led by the father. So then, what would you say to the young man who believes in that,
Mm-hmm.
and then goes to the father of a young lady he's interested, who doesn't believe in courting or believes in dating,
Yep.
or is just fairly hands off?
Yeah. I was just asked this question, and the young man that asked me the question, he said, hypothetically, and then he asked the question, I said, it's not hypothetical at all. It happens all the time. I've had to help some young men many times, and some ladies who are like, my dad doesn't care. What should I do?
Mm-hmm.
And so, regardless of what the father of the young lady thinks, he is her covenant head. And so the first thing I tell the young man is, it doesn't matter if he doesn't care. God cares. and God still sees him responsible for all of the activity that's going to take place as you're with this young lady. So don't get you in trouble and don't get him in trouble. So the rules all still apply in terms of fidelity, in terms of honoring this young lady, protecting her reputation. All of those things still apply. What you probably need, young man, is a person, maybe an elder, maybe your father, maybe an older brother in the Lord, who can hold you accountable and say the kinds of things to you, ask the kinds of questions to you that father should be asking. So find somebody. So it doesn't, and I would say, don't go argue with the father about whether or not, about how wrong his views are on dating versus courtship. That's a bad thing to do. Don't do that. But honor him, even if you disagree with his decision, by honoring his daughter rightly. That's what you want to do. And also to the young lady, I have had to say, same thing. Don't argue with dad about it too much. You can ask him if he would please be involved, even though you think it's it's just dating, it's just me. I'd love you to be involved, Dad. I'd love you to interview the guy and then tell me what you think. I'd love to have you involved in it in whatever way you think is appropriate, and bring him along and thank him for that. And at the same time, you might need to find the young lady may want to ask an elder to oversee what's going on and ask her, hold her accountable, or there may be a older woman who's been a good mentor to her in the years, and someone that can help her debrief on times and that kind of thing. So use the community of the church, and don't go pounding somebody because they. I mean, it's oftentimes it's Christian fathers who say, I don't know anything about courtship. Dating is fine. It worked fine for us. Look, your mom and I are married. And so it doesn't help to go and argue with somebody about that if they don't want to talk about it.
Right. Well, thank you, Dave.
Thank you.